Thank you, Madam Chair, and Happy New Year, everybody, to a great 2024 for sure. I'm going to go through the slide deck. Let me just wait from start. There we go. All right, so it's January 4th of 2024. Kind of where we start off at this time of the year is this is the Canadian chart that shows the uh, influenza status across Canada. And it's the solid blue line here that is this particular year. Now, you'll note this goes to week 49, so it only goes to early December results. But you'll see, even though it started, and we talked about this a couple meetings ago, that we had thought that there was going to be a later season this year. And sure enough, it started a couple, 3 weeks later than the previous year, which is shown by the dotted line. But it is following the average for influenza basically for the last decade, as it's following this black dotted line here. Again, this is a couple weeks old, or 3 weeks old technically. So the data is delayed, but we'll see. What I'll get into is some local wastewater data, which will indicate that most likely this will continue to follow the trend, at least for us, where it's going to continue to go up rather dramatically, and it has, with respect to influenza cases in our community over the last few weeks and into the first week of January, which is typical at this time of the year, especially with respect to family gatherings occurring. So what this first slide, or this slide here, shows is more up-to-date local wastewater data. And they now are tracking both influenza A and influenza B. This is influenza A, which is the more typical strain of influenza. It generally is about 75% of the cases from the data of influenza in a community. And you will see at the start of the year, January 1st of 2024, the wastewater numbers for influenza A were rather large and showing still an increase. So dramatic increase over that short period of time from the middle of December to the start of January. And again, if we think back at the previous slide I showed, that showed just to the first week of December numbers, which is more like here. So again, we're definitely going to be seeing an increase. If you were to project that out, those Canadian numbers, if we're an example, what's happening across Canada will continue that rather dramatic climb, and they have over the last few weeks. Now, influenza B cases have increased as well. It's very small numbers, a little dip here as well, which is good. From data, influenza B is generally later in the flu season. And if the influenza B numbers go up, that means you're going to have a longer flu season. So that's left to be seen what that's going to do in our region and what it's going to look like. Where's COVID? This is the COVID wastewater data. Again, at the start of December, middle December into early January, a big increase. However, there is a decrease happening here. So hopefully, maybe with COVID, maybe it has hit its peak and it's starting to come down. And I'll get into our hospital data with respect to how we're doing with respect to inpatients to see where that's tracking. RSV, as we've talked about for the last couple of months, it seems to have peaked in the November time period, which we did see with respect to especially our pediatric population, larger number of patients with RSV on our pediatric side, but it seems to be decreasing as we go along. So that's a good thing. And again, that's consistent with what we're seeing with RSV in the hospital. So when we look at what we've seen over the last 12 months, if you go back to January of 2023, on average, we had about 34 patients on a given day with COVID. We had about 3 patients with RSV and approximately 1 with the flu back in January of 2023. If we move to now, current state, January 2024, we're back to having 35 approximately patients with COVID in hospital, which we're experiencing today. I think 33 was the number today. But our influenza numbers are a little bit higher and have seen that increase over December and January, and our RSV as well. So they're in that 5 patient range on average for both RSV and influenza. So again, hopefully the RSV continues to go down. Influenza definitely hasn't peaked, but maybe COVID has peaked and is starting to go down. We'll see what the wastewater data continues to see in the future trends with respect to what's in our wastewater. So just a reminder to everybody is our current masking rules that we enhanced early December, seeing this was coming, continues. Nothing has changed with respect to that, but we're trying to take care again of vulnerable patients and patients in the hospital, and anyone visiting a patient must wear a mask while visiting in the patient's room. And the staff have been doing that since October-ish. We put that into place mid-October for the staff. Another update I want to give is with respect to the Evolve detectors. If you recall, we put those detectors, they're AI-based detectors in both of our emergency departments at the end of October. And as we stated at the time, we put them in because we had 4 relatively recent events that we were aware of, that people came into the emergency department with either knives and/or guns in certain circumstances. And working with our Joint Occupational Health Safety Committee, we had for years have put in a different mechanisms with respect to safety, but eventually had to land on these detectors. Again, the great thing about the Evolve detectors is they allow for better flow. Unlike a normal metal detector, you do not have to empty your pockets of your phone, your keys. As you walk through, multiple people can walk through at a time if need be, and it makes for better flow into, say, a hospital setting like ours. Again, very popular in hospital settings, in schools, and also in sporting events. You will see them as well to allow for better flow into the events, and does not require, again, people to empty their pockets, etc. So at the time, we used phrases like, we didn't know, meaning unless someone either dropped a knife or waved a knife or a gun, we didn't know they had it, or if it didn't fall out of their pocket. And unfortunately, we were told, and we knew this, that once we put these into place, we would be starting to see the volume of items increase rather rapidly that we were, quote, catching by these detectors. So since October 19th, we've had over 1,100 items seized, and over 600 of them are knives. And when you do the math, I did the quick math on this, so don't hold me to it, but it's about 16 items a day, give or take. I'll have the accountant support me on this with respect to the math. But I just gave 2 other examples because we look at knives, we look at guns. But one of the examples we have here are some, what do you call those? What do you call those?
Brass knuckles.
Brass knuckles. See, I knew Karen would know what they are. So brass knuckles, I forgot that. And unfortunately, on the right side are drugs, drug paraphernalia and drugs. So, by getting it there is take it away from the patient, but also get it off the streets as well. So, one of the general questions usually asked at this time is, what do we do with these items? When they're illegal like this, we notify the police and the police take them. So they take them off the streets or take them out of the community, which is good. So again, this provides a definitely another layer of security to our emergency department. And I really applaud our board of directors when we brought this forward for supporting it and understanding the rationale for it. Um, we said we would look at expanding it across other parts of the hospital. We're not quite there yet, but it sure is trending in that direction, that we would be looking at this technology on a much broader scale to other parts of the hospital, considering the numbers we have seen in the emergency department with just over 2 months of data. And again, what happens is these machines not only identify the item, but also identify where on the body the item is, or if it's in a backpack or something like that, it will identify the area which it's detecting. And it uses AI technology with respect to what the item looks like. So what does a gun look like? What is I say we haven't had it, but a pipe bomb or a knife or something like that, what that looks like. And makes an alert, and then it allows us to ask the individual if we could look at that particular area and seize the item so it doesn't get into the emergency department. And hopefully and confidently, what this does is provide protection not only to our staff, but other patients and visitors, them knowing that when they walk through, not only are they walking through, but the person sitting next to them is walking through as well. So therefore, it can provide more comfort in the emergency department. Is it 100%? No, nothing's 100%. All you got to do is ask the Detroit Lions about 100%, and they'll tell you nothing's 100%. So, but again, it's another layer of security and a very important one that has been very valuable for our organization. And as stated, we didn't know what we didn't know. And it is rather, if you were to ask me back on October 18th and on January 4th, how many items we would have seized using using these machines, and or how many knives we would have found, I would have never came close to this number. Meaning I would have guessed a lot lower on this number. But again, kudos to the security team and to our Joint Occupational Health Safety Committee, and again to our board of directors for their support in procuring these items and entering into a lease. And they've been very positive so far. So that's great news. Now I'm going to pass it over to Karen Riddell to give an update on our restoration activities regarding our Code Gray. Karen?
Thank you, David, and Happy New Year to everyone. So we had reported last month where we're at. So we'll start with an update. So we reported last month that we had just started initiating registration and backloading of patient information. That was the first week of December. Happy to say that on December 13th, we successfully went live with our electronic patient health record on Cerner. And we also had reported on the work that we were doing in diagnostic imaging with PACS. So as of today, very happy to advise that our PACS system is up and running. And you'll maybe recall that this system is where we electronically store images and reports for diagnostic imaging studies. So whether it's CTs, X-rays, ultrasounds, etc., instead of using the old manual filing, retrieving, and transporting of films. And it also allows for a chronologic view of a patient's radiology history, which is very important when we're looking at progression and staging of illness and disease, and assist the physicians in getting immediate access for interpretation, diagnosis, and treatment. So that's a significant step forward in our restoration activities. The next slide, please. So you'll recall we've been at 100% capacity doing our emergent and urgent CTs and MRIs throughout the code gray. We have had some initial impact for our semi-urgent priority cases during the code gray, and this was primarily due to the PACS downtime. But now that PACS is up and running, we'll be able to ramp up as early as next week with our P3s. And expect that we'll be able to get through our backlog of P3s within approximately 10 weeks. Our P4 or non-urgent priority cases have not been completed from a CT or MRI perspective throughout the code gray. We do expect to be able to ramp up for MRI later this month and for CT in February. And again, just a reminder that any referrals that we've received, we have reminded those physicians' offices of the current wait times to ensure that patients can be redirected to other hospitals that have capacity for that imaging, or if the patient is safe and appropriate to wait. And again, if anyone has any specific questions with regards to a referral that their physician has sent in, you can contact our diagnostic imaging department directly for information at 519-254-1727. Next slide, please. So we still have quite a number of systems left to bring online, and those have been prioritized regionally because, as you're aware, this criminal cyber attack did impact all of the hospitals in Erie St. Clair. So the clinical systems that I'm going to cover tonight that we expect to be seeing coming online this month include Pyxis. So Pyxis is our automated medication dispensing cabinets. They are working, but they are not currently integrated with our Cerner system. So we expect that we'll start to see integration the week of January 8th with our Pyxis. So it's a significant advance with regards to patient safety for medication management. Our C-board is nutrition software. So our software itself does work, but what this advancement and integration will allow is individualized meal ordering options and also tracking of patients when they're transferred and or discharged from the system, and does not require phone calls to dietary to let them know when patients have been moved or discharged. CVIS is our cardiovascular information system. So this is just like PACS, but for our cardiac imaging, echo reporting, diagnostic tests such as EKGs, our cath lab hemodynamic system, and other components in the health record. So it's very similar to our DI PACS, and it allows for remote viewing of images and studies, which is really important as we transfer patients back and forth to other hospitals in Ontario to allow cardiac surgeons, for example, to visualize cardiac caths and other imaging that we have done locally for patients prior to surgery. So we're excited that that will be coming back up soon. And our lab is still working on our hematology module. So that still does require some manual processing in the lab and is not yet fully integrated with Cerner. So the team is actively working on a solution, and we're looking forward to that coming online soon. And that's the end of my portion of the report. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that's the report of Karen Riddell and myself. And if any board members have any questions, we're more than glad to answer them.
Thank you, David. Karen. Linda.
Yeah, Karen, what would it take for, would it be all systems to come back before the code gray is lifted?
I'll maybe let David respond to that one.
Yeah, good question. It's probably with respect to PACS going back up, if we can get some stability, then we're pretty close to being able to, quote, lift the code gray. So if we can get some road underneath our tires for the next couple of weeks with PACS, and then get the CVIS and Pyxis back up, I think we're good. So the next couple weeks will be key. Because then our main clinical items will be back up. So shortly, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Chris?
David, I'm wondering if you can tell us, obviously the flu vaccine that comes out is kind of the best guess based upon what they see in Australia and whatnot. How do we have any idea how accurate that was for this year, thought-wise? And if we get any idea how widespread is its use in the Windsor-Essex region? Are people getting it or not, I guess, too?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm going to pass it over to Wasim or Karen with respect to the what do we know about the vaccine as a match?
Thank you, David. Just to put it into perspective, year over year, the range of vaccine accuracy is anywhere from 40 to 60%. It's never greater than that, really, and usually not much lower than that, although there have been some years where it was only about a 20 or 30% match. This year, best estimates are that it's around 50, 55%. That's information based out of the CDC. And I don't know what the uptake is like locally. And I don't know if the health unit has published that data, but the vaccine at 54% or 55% is considered at the higher end of accurate relative to previous years.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Wasim. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, again, thank you, David, Karen, for your report.